I recovered from a house fire 20 years ago. You're about to hear the story I tell doctors. This part of the video is in black and white. At the end of the story, I share 10 lessons I learned as a result of going through this experience. Then I'll come back to you and show you how to use this fire story as a financial metaphor. You'll see how you can translate these 10 lessons into financial advice you can share with your physician clients. If we've not met, I'm Dr. Vicki Rachner. I'm a retired surgeon who has spent the past 15 years helping financial advisors work with physician clients. All right, so here I go telling my story. 20 years. It's been 20 years since Katrina struck. Do you remember where you were when you were watching the news coverage? I do. I remember sitting in a gray chair, just glued to the TV. As I was watching, I heard a ping. I got an email. I opened it up, and it was from the American College of Surgeons. They were looking for volunteers to go down to New Orleans, to Alabama, to other places in Louisiana and offer care. I immediately signed up. A few days later, I got a call from a representative from the American College of Surgeons. She introduced herself and she said, Dr. Rachner, I'd like to collect the information I'm going to need to get you licensed and credentialed down south. Is this a good moment? And I had to take a deep breath and say, may I get back to you? You see, on that day, in that moment, I was standing in the corner of my yard watching some construction people throw chunks of my burned roof into a dumpster. In mid-June, I lost my house and virtually all of my possessions in a house fire. So I'd like to tell you the story of what happened 20 years ago in mid-June, the day of my house fire. Now, let me just say in advance that there was no loss of human life. One of my cats and my goldfish died, and I was able to replace everything that I had lost. I was very well insured. I am very fortunate to have access to so many resources. So everything worked out fine. But what I'd also like to share with you are the lessons that I have learned as I reflect on this night. All right, so what happened that day? Well, it started out like pretty much any normal day. It was evening. I was catching up on my laundry. At about 8 o'clock, I decided I was hungry, so I threw some salmon in the broiler, and I was folding laundry when I heard the smoke alarm go off. Now, this smoke alarm was exquisitely sensitive. It practically went off when I boiled water. So I thought, the oil from the salmon is causing smoke, and that's the reason. I opened up the oven door, and the salmon was just fine. I turned my head, and I saw wisps of gray smoke coming from around the corner, from the laundry alcove. I stepped into the alcove, and I saw red flames shooting up from behind the dryer. I grabbed the fire extinguisher that was right there and extinguished the flames that I could see. Then I took up my flip phone, remember those? And I called 911. I was instructed to get everybody out of the house. Well, the only person inside of the house was me. My son was with his dad. There was also my chocolate lab, Elvira, and 3 of my cats. I had to get Elvira off of the couch and outside, and I saw 2 of the 3 cats just scatter. So I went around to the front of the house, and by the time I got there, I could see black smoke coming from the chimney. Around that time, the first responder, Anna Ormsby, arrived at the scene. She wanted to ensure that everyone was out of the house, and she wanted the road cleared so that the fire truck could have easy access to the house. Well, as we were waiting for the firefighters, one neighbor brought me a leash for my dog. Another brought me closed-toe shoes. Another brought me a sweater. And finally, the firefighters arrived. It was dark by that time. One of the firefighters asked, "Is there anything that you want me to get from inside of the house. And I could think of a lot of things I really wanted, but I wasn't going to ask somebody to risk their life for a thing. Later, the firefighters did bring out 3 things. 2 ancient prayer books. The other thing that they brought out was my 3rd cat, who had hidden in the closet. They immediately administered oxygen. I didn't have my car. The car was still parked in the garage, just feet away from the dryer. It was a white car. We later called it the Carshmallow. It was all charred and black. I remember the rear view mirror was melted, just hanging on by a thin thread of plastic. It was kind of like a Salvador Dali photo. So the fire marshal suggested that he take us to the vet clinic. So he took us there. I checked her, and then we went back to the house. By that time, all of the active flames were extinguished, but there were firefighters there just making sure that the flames were really out. And this kind fire marshal just walked me through what I needed to do next. The next morning, I walked over to my house to see what was going on now that there was light. There were 2 firefighters that had stayed at my property the entire night to make sure that the fire was really extinguished. I walked around the house and looked in the windows to see the devastation. The firefighters invited me in so I could see what had happened on the inside. The water cooler that was right across from the dryer was reduced to metal coils and a puddle of water. That was all that was left. I saw my big aquarium with dead fish just floating at the top. I actually found my son's photo album that was remarkably there. It was below a glass coffee table, and so it had been protected from the fire and from water. And so I actually still had that. But the firefighter explained that virtually everything in the house would have to go between the fire, the smoke damage, and the water damage. The house would need to be taken back to the studs and entirely rebuilt. This felt completely overwhelming. I simply did not know how I would get through it. But because of the kindness of people who have been through this kind of thing before, I was able to move forward and make really important choices about what I was going to do next. Was I going to just sell the property? Was I going to rebuild? Was I going to do a remodel when I rebuilt? Well, slowly, step by step, we started to recover. My cat, who had been in the house, died tragically. My son and I buried her in the backyard, and we made a little gravestone. As time went on, my son started having really, really bad nightmares. My son had the concern that our cat was once again alive, and she was trapped in the box that our new computer printer came in. Well, I called up my parenting instructor, and she said, when you deal with kids in trauma, just imagine putting his brain in a Cuisinart. Everything gets totally messed up. She did recommend a therapist who dealt with childhood trauma, and I took my son in, and he, in fact, was diagnosed with trauma, PTSD. So he underwent some incredibly helpful therapy that really changed his life. So slowly, I made the important decisions about how we were going to move forward. I hired the contracting team. They made deadline promises that were almost always missed. So things were going much, much slower than I ever wanted or imagined. But finally, the day had come, and we were able to move into our home. Now, I had been living in that house for about 7 years, so I knew what worked for me in the house and what didn't work so well. And the fire really gave me an opportunity to rebuild in a way that really made the house work for us. And it was such a delight to live there, to be there. So again, I recognize my privilege. I recognize that not everybody has the resources that I had. But what I can tell you is that I wound up better and stronger after the house fire than before. So here are 10 things that I would like to pass along that I learned as a result of this whole experience. Tip number 1, check your dryer. The fire inspector came out to the property to try to determine the cause of the fire. Here's the way the fire inspector described it to me. He said, your dryer is kind of like a toaster oven. It just keeps heating and heating. There's a special switch that keeps it from overheating, and that switch failed. So the dryer got very hot, and it set the lint on fire. I said, but I regularly clean the lint filter. He said, no, that is not the cause of dryer fires. There is lint that gets accumulated internally on the coils. And once a year, you've got to take your dryer out and really get all of the lint that collects in there. So please get your dryer cleaned. Who knows how many house fires I have prevented by just offering this one tip. Okay, number 2, plan for the what ifs. So we all know that we should be prepared for certain things. So let me ask you today, if somebody told you that you had 60 seconds to collect your most valuable things in your house, what would you take? I recommend that you have a special place and a special box where you put things that would be very hard to replace. Your passport, your will and trust, your important legal documents, your key to your safe deposit box, precious things. So if you have to leave, like I had to leave my house, you can just grab it and run. Well, a lot of us buy insurance to help protect us in the event of the what ifs. Now, I had 2 different insurance companies that I dealt with. The first was State Farm. They insured my house. I cannot say enough good things about State Farm. The way they treated me with the care and compassion, the way they walked with me through the whole process was just amazing. My car was insured by a different carrier. I insured with them to get a lower premium. And I will tell you that it was like I was their employee, not that they were there to help me. So be really careful about who insures you. You want to make sure that you've got the right help when you actually need them. Number 3, take an inventory. Now, the insurance company had agreed to replace all of the things that I had lost. But the problem is I didn't really know what I had lost. Some of the things were just incinerated. So I had no idea what I had lost. So what I recommend doing is just taking your phone and just shooting a video. Just go through every room in your house and point out the things of value. Open up your closets, open up your drawers, and have a complete inventory. That would have saved me a lot of time and trouble. Well, this video is a physical inventory. I invite you to take a metaphoric inventory. Who are the important people in your life? What are the important activities in your life? Does your calendar reflect your true priorities? Does your spending reflect your priorities? This is a chance to align the way you invest your time and money with what really matters most. In the end, things are just things. Lesson number 4. People will surprise you with the kindness of strangers. I remember going to the drugstore just piled with all the cleaning stuff that you would help your kids get when they go off to college. The woman behind me asked, "Are you new in town?" And I said, no, I've lived here for years, but I just had a house fire, so I'm replacing all of the things that I lost. She said, I read about you in the paper. Then for whatever reason, I said, these things are easy to replace, but I'll tell you, my son is very sad because he lost his entire train collection, and he really loved those. And this person, whose name I didn't even know, I'm sorry, I'm getting kind of emotional, but this woman said, my son loved trains too. He's an adult now. Can I give you his trains? And she brought them over to the house. But I will tell you something else. Other people surprised me. People who were close friends pulled away. The pain that my son and I experienced was just too much for them. They couldn't handle it. And many of these people were very strong people. I surprised myself. I couldn't believe that I had the things in me that helped me move forward. Now, don't get me wrong. There were many days when I just felt overwhelmed by the enormity of this task. But I was able to move forward. We actually got the house rebuilt. We got back to our lives. Speaking of my son, who was 7 at the time of the house fire, he reminded me of the next take-home lesson, which is make time for joy. Now, my son had a love affair with baseball, and we saw a lot of baseball games that summer. I'd even taken him to New York, to the old Yankee Stadium before they rebuilt it. So he asked me, can we go see a Mariners game? The Yankees were coming to town, and he really wanted to see that game. I said, sweetie, that would be really great, but look at all of the things I've got to do. I just don't have time. And he said, but Mom, it's just a couple hours. I'll help you. So I relented and took him to the game. And as we were walking to the stadium, he had his catcher's mitt, and he was pounding his mitt with his hand, and he looked up at me and he said, Mom, this is the best day of my whole life. And my heart just melted. Like, having fun was sort of the last thing on my to-do list. But it was the exact perfect thing to do. There's always time for play. And it seems almost paradoxical, but that can be a fuel that drives you and helps you get through these challenging times in life. Number 6, be willing to receive. So just like there's a circle of life, so too there's a cycle of giving and receiving. Remember I told you about that phone call from the American College of Surgeons? More than anything, I wanted to be able to go down and offer a helping hand to people who were less fortunate than I was. But the truth is that my family needed me. This was not the season in my life to be giving. This was the season to be receiving. And for those who give, this can be a difficult lesson. But what I can tell you is that whenever I receive something, like the train set that this stranger offered to me, I gave this other person a chance to give. And so I learned the lesson that it's important to be able to graciously give and to graciously receive. One thing I invite you to think about giving to others is grace. I was sort of out of it a lot of days, and I remember going into a store. There were people lining up at the counter, so I just went up to the counter and got in line, I thought. But then the woman reminded me that there was an entire line going down the hall, and she got really mad at me for skipping the line. And I just had to apologize to her and said, I'm sorry, I didn't see it. I didn't know that it was there. But had she known what I was going through, my guess is she wouldn't have spoken to me with the tone and the words that she used. When somebody isn't at their best, you just never know what they're going through. So be kind, be gracious, be forgiving. Tip number 7, express gratitude. Now, most of the days were really, really hard. I was face to face with everything that was wrong with my house, with the world, it seemed like. Yet I knew intellectually that I was going to be better off if I celebrated the things for which I was grateful, like the generosity of strangers. My son and I had a book that we loved to read. It's called Time for Bed. And there was this one page, it's time for bed, little calf, what happened today that made you laugh? And my son and I together thought that at the end of each day, we would say 3 things for which we were grateful and 1 thing that made us laugh. So what happened is our attention would be focused on these things so we could find them. I also was really struck with some truly miraculous things. I remember one day I was going through the house and the contractors had taken all of the things that needed to be thrown away and they put them in big plastic bags. And I was just going through the master bathroom and this bag from inside of the bathtub just like called to me. So I opened up the bag and there were hundreds of dreidels, you know, those little toys that we use to celebrate Hanukkah. But what the people who dumped all of these dreidels into the bag didn't know is that there was something very precious in there. There was a handmade silver dreidel, and I was able to recover it. Now, there are 4 Hebrew letters on the sides of the dreidel, and it stands for the words, "A great miracle happened here." And it was a great miracle that I found this treasure, and I made a commitment to try to find these miracles. And I didn't have to look very hard. They were all around me. Number 8, remember that you cannot skip grief. Every time you lose something, there is sadness, there is grief. Even when you're moving on to a new stage, when you're getting the thing you wanted. So I remember celebrating when my son was potty trained, but there was a part of me that felt sad that we wouldn't have these special times at the changing table anymore. Grief is a natural reaction. But I remember thinking I didn't have time to grieve. And in fact, if I felt that sadness, if I felt that grief, I would just get consumed by it. And I wouldn't be able to get anything done. So I resisted grieving for a long time. Then when Elvira died, the dog that was with me on the day of the fire, it all hit me like a ton of bricks. Now, Elvira and I were close, but what had happened was her loss triggered all of the grief for all of the things that I had not grieved in the past. So there are consequences for not being willing to feel your sadness or your grief. If you're closed to grief or sadness, you're also closed to joy. So one of the things that I have learned is I am going to be open to any feeling. Feelings are just information, and I'm there for it all, for the things that I want, for the things that I don't want. Number 9, respect the power of a traumatic event. Now, globally, we have all been through a traumatic event, the pandemic. Yet each person on this planet has had their own unique experience of the pandemic. So some people just move on. Other people are going to be dealing with trauma as a result of going through the pandemic. Now, trauma is not what happens outside of you. Trauma is what happens inside of you as a result of the events around you. So the classic example is PTSD. So there is a soldier who's safely home. They hear a truck backfire, and suddenly they're back on the battlefields in Afghanistan. Their brain does not understand that the past is over. every time they face circumstances that remind them of the initial traumatic event, they're suddenly back there. They become the person that they were in that moment of time. So my son clinically had PTSD. And thanks to the intervention of his therapist, he was able to heal from this traumatic event. Not all of us are that fortunate. Some of us carry around evidence of childhood trauma. So if you ever face circumstances and you just don't feel like you're your full self, it could be that you have become a version of yourself that was maybe a child when similar circumstances unfolded. This often goes unacknowledged and unnoticed. But I saw my son heal before my eyes. And just know that if you suspect that you might be dealing with childhood trauma, there really are ways of healing from that. Number 10, you are much more powerful and resilient than you ever imagined. I remember thinking at one point that what I most wanted was to keep my son from experiencing pain. And my parenting coach said, "Is that really practical? Maybe you have an ideal opportunity to show your son what it means to be resilient." And this thought brought me comfort. We can't avoid pain. I didn't choose this house fire, right? It chose me. But I got to decide how I responded to it. And in the end, I sort of feel like this phoenix rising from the ashes. Even if I could go back and change my history, I wouldn't change a thing. The lessons that I learned as a result of going through this changed my life for the better. So I bet as you listen to my fire story, the financial parallels jumped out at you. Here are 10 ways you can translate those fire lessons into financial lessons for your doctor clients. Number 1, check for hidden risks. Just like the lint that hid deep in the dryer represented the true risk, doctors too have hidden money leaks, tax inefficiencies, and lifestyle creep, and underperforming accounts. You can help your doctor clients spot them and clean them out before they ignite and cause problems. Number 2, plan for the what ifs. In a fire, you need a go-to bag. With money, doctors need a financial go-to bag. Wills and trusts and insurance and passports, all ready for the unexpected. Number 3, take an inventory. After the fire, I didn't know what I had lost. Doctors often don't know exactly what they own or owe. You can help them with an inventory that brings clarity and control. Number 4, build a dream team. I rebuilt with help from neighbors and firefighters and contractors and therapists. Doctors need a financial dream team too. You can lead this team, and you can vet doctor-friendly CPAs and attorneys and estate planners and insurance pros. Number 5, fund joy on purpose. In the middle of the chaos, my son begged me to go to the baseball game. It reminded me joy matters. Help your physician clients plan and fund joy intentionally. And joy isn't reserved for retirement. There's a balance between joy today and joy tomorrow. Number 6, be willing to receive help. I had to accept support after my fire. Doctors often resist asking for help and then receiving it. You can normalize the experience of getting financial guidance. You can comment on a doctor's strength for reaching out. Number 7, practice gratitude. Even in the ashes, I found miracles. Gratitude helps doctors shift from a scarcity to an abundance mindset. and it changes how they spend and save and give. Number 8, don't skip grief. Loss is a part of life, and it's a part of money. Failed investments, malpractice lawsuits, debt. Acknowledging grief helps doctors move forward. Number 9, respect money trauma. My son was diagnosed with PTSD after the fire. Some doctors carry money trauma too, from student loans or lawsuits or scams or pandemic-related financial loss. If you find doctors acting irrationally about money, there's a possibility that they sustained financial trauma when they were a child. If that is the case, you can begin a conversation. What were you taught about money? What kinds of experiences did you have around money when you were growing up? If you identify a bankruptcy or a foreclosure, there is a possibility that the doctor that you see before you is not acting like their age. They're acting more like the child they were at the time of the foreclosure. Please know that there is therapy for financial trauma, and please feel welcome to reach out to me, and I'd be happy to give you more resources about that. And then number 10, remember resilience. In the end, I built stronger. Remind doctors that setbacks don't define them. With the right plan, they too can rise from the ashes. When you frame these lessons as financial advice, you become more than the portfolio manager. You become the financial first responders doctors trust. Would you like some help navigating this conversation with doctors? Well, below you will find a link to a conversation guide. It will take you through all 10 of these steps. Thanks for stopping by. I appreciate your time and attention. If you would like more information about working with doctor clients, go and watch this video. It contains a masterclass about how to sell to doctors. See you on the other side.